Welcome back to the Pushing Through Loss podcast, where we share stories, honor resilience, and embrace strength. I am Kalila Green Siciliano, and it is my honor to begin the journey with you. I am here today with Stephanie, who I just met, and I already feel like we are connected. I think it's so great to have you, so welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Let's start, I guess, at the beginning, because I was looking over your website and I saw that you do come from a background of loss and of grief. And I'm sure that there is a ton more about you. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So that's correct. My dad died when I was 4 years old. So that was my first introduction to serious loss. And I grew up in a teetotaler home, but there was not a lot of investment in, I guess, character building and like raising me into being an adult. It was kind of like, there's food, there's clothes, we're doing these things, but there was no real like investment. So I came into adulthood. I really just thought it was going to be a big giant party. I just thought adulthood was like I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. Whoop whoop, let's have all the fun. Fun was what I'm drawn to. That's like my kryptonite, right? And so I was ignorant and foolish and stupid, and I made a lot of really poor decisions because of that. And which led into a lifelong journey of growing up and maturing. And there's definitely a lot of loss and pain and hurt in that process.
Yeah. It sounds like after your dad died, your family went into survival mode and it was like, we just need to get from one day to the next.
Yeah, my mom remarried about 13 months later,
Mhm.
and he was very jealous. And so I was not allowed to talk about my father. I was not allowed to have pictures of my father. It was like sweep, sweep under the rug. Uh-huh.
And at 5 or 6 years old, you're like, but all I want to do is remember my dad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was insane. Like, I don't even have a lot of formative memories of my childhood, I think, because like my brain had to kind of go into shutdown mode not to freak out.
Right.
And I was mean. I was mean. Like my processing unit was like mean as a snake.
Aw.
I did not go inward. I was just
Just
full of
lashed out.
rage. Yes, full of rage and anger and hatred.
Wow. Which is so funny because your smile lights up the screen. So I would have I literally would not be like, you're the meanest person ever. I would never have said that in my wildest dreams.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't think I was born to be that way. I
Right.
don't think I was supposed to be that way, but I have my mom said that I came out with two pistols loaded. Like
Ready to go.
I was ready to go. And I've always been very wild at heart and drawn to wild and um but pain, right?
Right.
Pain shifts who you are if you don't know how to harness it and walk through stuff.
For
So,
sure.
and I didn't have any guidance. I was told to shut it down, and that's just not who I am, and I could not process that way.
And I don't think that's fair to anybody, whether you hold your emotions close to your heart or you really let them out. It's not fair to tell anybody to just shut it down. You can't process what you're going through in that case. And you just sort of repress, 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 and
Yeah.
then it all builds up.
Yes. When I was 16 was when I started dealing with my dad's death, because at that
Wow.
point I had two birdie fingers up and I didn't care what my parents said. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
at that point I'd piss them all off
Right.
if that's what I needed to do. And so it was really when I was 16 years old that I started being able to process
Hmm.
what happened and what was going on and who he was. And I would say that because I wasn't allowed to process as a child or like be guided in any way, my grief system, like my processing system, probably took twice as long as it should have, right? Because I had to navigate it all myself.
Right.
And, I came into the complexity of adulthood in that process and then created all my own chaos. So it was like it kind of got compiled.
Right.
And so I was probably in my mid 30s before I feel like I really came to some good peace
Mhm.
with his loss and all of that.
Wow. That's a lot. And it's a
Yes.
lot to go through as a kid. Once you started to come to peace, I saw on your bio that not only are you a survivor of parent loss, but you're also a survivor of your spouse had passed away. So tell me a little bit about how you guys met and what that process, what happened.
Okay. So, oh, Jay Jordan.
I like the sigh
Um,
that comes with it.
the greatest part of my life, in so many ways, and he was the biggest pain in the ass of my life as well. Um, so he actually made fun of me when we were teenagers for being
Mm.
a Christian.
Oh, interesting.
He hated Christians, hated God, hated Jesus. His whole life's goal was to OD in New Orleans on his 21st birthday.
Wow.
And he would make fun of guys that talked to me like anything, like
Hmm.
just hated me. I was really the only outwardly spoken Christian in the Birmingham punk scene in the 90s. So
Okay.
I had a lot of target on I had a big old target,
Right.
and 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 the craziest turn of events, God got a hold of him, and he was baptized in New Orleans on his 21st birthday.
So the exact opposite. That's amazing.
Yes. So he came alive at that time.
Wow.
So fast forward, I didn't know he had become a Christian. Me and my son, so I have an ex-husband that beat me up when I was pregnant with my son, and so I left him. And I tried to work the marriage out for 2 years, but he was never gonna sober up. He never was gonna get any help or anything, and so
Mm,
I God delivered me from that marriage, but it took about 2 years.
mm,
And, and I was at a punk show with my son. It was an all ages show, and we were standing outside talking to some friends, and, um, here Jay comes in this raggedy, beat up old truck, and he pulls over and he gets out and he starts talking, and he's talking about being a Christian. Well, I knew that he had hated me, for
right.
in
You're
our
like, is
teen
this the same
years.
person? What?
I'm like, you're so full of crap,
Right.
right? Like that's my first thought. And so we start talking about like we'd love to have like a punk rock ministry and all this sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And so he asked for my phone number. He held out his t-shirt for me to write it on his t-shirt. And I start writing it, and I'm like, I could throw it off just one number. And it was like God wouldn't let me.
Right.
And so he called me the next day and he was like, "Hey, this is Jay. We met, and I was like, I know exactly who you are,
Right. Do you not
like,
remember that we grew up together and you hated me?
yes. Like, I mean, he was notorious. Like, he was a gigantic man. He was 6'3", nearly 400 pounds.
Wow.
I mean, he was demonstrative and charismatic. And when you met him, you never forget him. Like,
Right.
you just, I was like, I know exactly who you are. So, um, I know this is long and you can tell me to fast forward if you need
No,
me
that's
to, but
fine. I love it.
so, um, we start a ministry together,
So
and
you're just sort of friends at this point and that's
yeah,
interesting.
yes. And so one night he comes over to my house and I'm like, look, I know you have a crush on me, but it is never going to happen. So can we just get over this like whole weird thing and just be friends?
That's so
And
cute.
he was like, I've never been so uncomfortable in all of my
Like
life.
somebody called me out. Wait a minute.
And so I mean, he had his eyes locked and loaded on me. He dated me for months without me being a participant.
Oh, that's so funny.
And and then one night we were talking about something and I was like, he's not so bad. And and then really God called me into it. I had no intentions on, I mean, Jay Jordan was a serious stinking hot mess. And I had no intentions on going there, but God brought me um God told me that my new name would be Jordan, which was his last name. And I was like, oh no,
Like,
mm-mm.
wait a minute, that's not. Are you sure you heard that right?
That's not gonna happen. And so I set up a meeting with the pastor and he said, well, you should pray about it. He said, the Jordan's a really prominent place in the Bible, go find out about it. And the reason I'm telling you all this because it spans into everything we're talking about. And
Hmm.
I started looking up scriptures
Hmm.
about the Jordan, and I was brought to the story um, where the leper king, is told by Elijah to go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and
Hmm.
he would be renewed like a young boy.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Have you seen the Jordan River? Like that place is nasty."
Also,
Like
it's really small. The first time I ever saw it, we drove across it on this little bridge, and I was like, "That's the Jordan River? That's what they're talking about? You could like jump across it with just your feet. Are you kidding me?"
you're expecting like at least the Mississippi, right? Like
Something
something
like
is
that.
substantial.
Or at least like I used to live on River Road or off of River Road in Pennsylvania. I'm expecting like the Delaware, something.
Yes. And you're like, this is it. I've never seen it in person, so I'm gonna laugh when I get there
Oh
because
yeah, there are
I'll
parts
think
of
the
it that
same
are a
thing.
little bit wider, but the parts that you really cross over, it's almost like, have you ever seen Men in Tights? That
No.
movie, it's a Mel Brooks movie. And
Uh-huh.
there's this scene where little John is trying to defend this itty bitty stream, and he's like, "You cannot cross the river," and they like jump from one bank to the other. That's what I picture in my head now when I think of the Jordan River, because I'm like, there are parts of it that are so small, and you almost can't even get underwater. That's how small it is.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so not significant, right? And really dirty.
And but like really significant in, because I'm Jewish, in the Torah and in Christian writings. I mean, it's
Yes.
huge.
It's so, I mean, the Jordan is basically God's dwelling place. Like
Right.
the Jordan River is so important. And so, he says, go and wash 7 times and you'll be renewed like a young boy. And the
Hmm.
king is resistant because the Jordan is a disgusting hot mess and he
Right.
ain't having it. And he's a
Right.
king and he thinks he's above that, right? And so his like servant guy was like, maybe, like, what's it gonna hurt? Like
Right.
you're already a leper. Nobody wants to touch you anyway.
Right. Try it out.
Like
What's the
this,
worst that can happen?
that's right. This arrogant king full of leprosy, right? It's like gross, that's dirty. The irony, right? So that was kind of my own heart. And so that was the story that solidified it for me. And I became a Jordan. I told Jay on a Sunday. We got married on Wednesday.
Aw.
And I mean, he had been waiting to marry me for, nearly a year at that point.
Right.
And so um it was um it was a walk into the Jordan River because
Hmm.
he was a mess, and he taught me more about love than anybody I've ever been around.
Wow.
um if there is one legacy he left, it is a legacy of love and how to love and what love is. And I mean, I feel so honored at this point um to have had that experience. So fast forward, we were married 10 years.
Mm.
The summer of 2014. So I told you I had one son. We
Mhm.
got pregnant 3 weeks after we got married because God knew we were going to need
Wow.
humans to keep this crazy train together. He was like, a piece of paper is never going to work. Let's give
Right.
them people. And so we ended up having 4 kids together.
Aw.
And and So my youngest was born in April of 14. And I guess I need to go back to the end of 13. We had planned on getting divorced.
Okay.
We were just done. We were spent.
Mhm.
A lot of trauma had happened between I opened a business in January of 2012. I got pregnant with baby four months later. My back went out. I had to have emergency back surgery. Like
Wow.
all this trauma had started happening. And so at the end of 13, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And
Mhm.
he was like, I can't do this anymore either. So we had agreed that we would get through the holidays and
Mhm.
then we would get a divorce after the first of the year. Well, he was at my salon putting cameras in, and I'm sitting at home in front of the fireplace and I'm knitting, and I feel a bump bump. And I'm like, either that was a baby or that was some heck of some muscle memory.
Mhm.
And I call him and I was like, I think I just felt a baby move. And he was like, are you trying to freak me out? And I'm like, well, I'm freaking out. So knock yourself out. Go right
Right.
ahead.
Join me.
And so I'm like, you need to bring him a pregnancy test. So he brings home a pregnancy test, so it lights up like a Christmas tree. And at this point, I'm like, babe, we cannot wash our clothes in the same load, or I'm gonna get pregnant. Like this game keeps backfiring. I've been
Right.
trying to get you pregnant, and I keep getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And and so we wave our Wile E. Coyote white flags of defeat. Like
Mhm.
we are just spent. So fast forward to that summer, Jay starts praying for me every day that God would heal the broken little girl inside of me.
Mhm.
And we went to a conference that September with the man that led him to Christ all those years ago, just
Mhm.
by loving on him.
Mhm.
And the second day we were at this conference, God said to me, if you leave him, you will always long for him.
Interesting.
And he gave me a feeling of utter dread
Mhm.
on my inside. And it was a split moment of time, but I can still feel what I felt that day. And I was like, whoa. And so we get home from this conference, and God miraculously heals our marriage. Every day, the Holy Spirit starts telling me. So we get home from this conference on like October 5th.
Mhm.
Well, October 11th was Jay's birthday, and he always did this like motorcycle event every year on his birthday. And um one night I was laying in bed, and God said to me, go offer yourself to your husband and do not leave him vulnerable. And I was like, no. Like, do you see how many babies are in this bed? You know, this is at midnight. I'm like, it's midnight. I'm covered in babies. Like,
Right.
no, I'm not
Right.
doing that. And a few seconds later, go offer yourself to your husband and do not leave him vulnerable. And so I I did what God told me to do exactly down to the T. He told me everything to do. And Jay was like, why are you being so nice to me? And I couldn't say because the Holy Spirit told me to. That's not exactly foreplay, right? And so I the next day, his one of his ex-girlfriends shows up from his teen years that had
Mhm.
been trying to borrow my husband over the years, right?
Oof.
Like she had crossed boundaries to the point where I was like, you can't be alone with her anymore.
Right.
And she shows up. Well, he is blowing me up at work. He is calling like every phone that I have looking for me. And he was like, I didn't know she was coming. I didn't know she was coming.
Aw.
But God knew. that she was coming,
Right.
and God knew what her intention was.
Right.
And so he protected us because I was the only thing on Jay Jordan's mind. You
Right.
know what I mean? And so it was stuff like that, just constant. Stephanie, don't talk. Stephanie, don't say this. Stephanie, shut your mouth. Just serve, all this sort of stuff. So December comes along, and we're at this. Me and the kids are at this family event we go to every year, and Jay wasn't with us. And he calls me and he was like, I miss you. When are you coming home? And I was like, you miss me?
Aw.
Like, you hadn't missed me in at least 5 years. And he said, I'm really enjoying you. I'm enjoying
Hmm.
you more now than I have in maybe since we first got together.
That's so sweet.
And I said, do you want to know why? And he said, yeah. So I told him about the Holy Spirit just walking me through day
Mhm.
by day. And so I'm thinking God's healing our marriage to send us into ministry, because that was always kind of our heart. We had talked
Mhm.
about adopting kids and like all this sort of stuff. Um, no, God was healing our marriage because on December 29th that year, he died
Oh,
suddenly,
man.
like totally normal day. And then my husband's dead in my bed.
Wow.
And that was a shock and trauma unparalleled. Let
Right.
me just tell you that.
Right.
And so now I have five babies. I have a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old by myself with a dead husband on the floor. And he died in my bed, but they drug him into the floor when I called 911 if there's a disconnect in that sentence. But um, and that took me on the journey of my lifetime for
Mhm.
sure, of loss and pain and grief. And here's the interesting part about um death is when you visited a death once before, what I didn't realize is there were parts of me from losing my dad that were still lost
Mhm.
in the valley of darkness.
Mhm.
And it was 8 months after Jay died when God started healing me and renewing me like a young girl.
Mhm.
And when that healing started happening, I knew it. I was the leper king, covered in my own nastiness,
Mhm.
thinking I'm too good for the Jordan,
Mhm.
right? And then I walked through it, and you want to talk about, I mean, miraculous healings
Mhm.
that God has given me through that. It's been mind blowing, and He has honored every prayer that Jay ever prayed over me to
Wow.
renew me.
Wow. I want to ask you because your faith in God is so steadfast and it's really remarkable given that at 4 you lost your dad, at around 5 or 6 you were basically told do not ever speak of your father, he didn't exist, you're here because of a miracle apparently, and then losing your husband and literally you've spoken nothing but praises for God, however you believe in God, whether it's Jesus or whether it's God as the singular form like I do. And I find that so remarkable given your history, given what you've been through. How did you find such strong faith?
Thank you, first of all, for saying that. That is my hope and my heart, right? Is that right there, is that you
Mhm.
can see that. Um, Relationship.
Okay.
Um, because I have been very angry at God. And I
And
even
you have
talk
every
about
right
this.
to be.
Yes. I even talk about this in my death tsunami. Um, First of all, God has stayed so close.
Mhm.
He never left me. I mean, the fact that I survived, I had a storefront business with I mean, a lot of employees, 5 children, 2 babies, and I could barely function.
Mhm.
I should have lost it all.
Mhm.
everything should have fallen apart, and it
Hmm.
didn't.
That's
It
incredible.
it didn't. Um, I did get up and I showed up,
Hmm.
but that's all I did. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? It was just such utter faithfulness, and he carried me through all of that
Hmm.
time, all of that season. Um, and just I had to learn to forgive him
Hmm.
and trust that he is God and I am not,
Hmm.
right? And he's taught me so much about death. Um, and really, so I call my book The Death Tsunami because it truly is a tsunami, but it's all in the spirit realm.
Hmm.
You can't see it, right? It all happens, spiritually, physically, mentally,
Yep.
emotionally, but you don't see any of that happening.
Right.
It's and so um I was able to just be honest.
Hmm.
And I learned that from Jay. Jay was the first person that I ever heard cuss in a prayer. And I'm like, you can't cuss in a prayer. You're talking to God,
Right.
And Jay goes, he knows I'm thinking it anyway. What does it matter whether I say it?
Right.
Right. And just that sheer authenticity and that honesty. And I watched God pursue this hot mess that was
Hmm.
Jay Jordan in the most beautiful ways. And it was like, oh, oh, you mean I just have to be real? Like, I'm not fooling God. God knows
Right.
exactly what is in my heart and in my mind,
Right.
right? So that was that was the journey. It's just being real. Like, I'm
Hmm.
angry with you. How could you leave me here like this?
Hmm.
Like, how could you do this to my kids? You did this to me, when I was little. How could you
Hmm.
repeat this? Like, and slowly but surely, he just kept ministering to my heart. And what I had to come to accept is that he promises to complete his work here on this earth. And I had to trust that he had completed
Hmm.
the work in Jay.
Hmm.
I could give you 5 good reasons that pack out a minivan why Jay Jordan wasn't done.
Right. Right.
But God knew that he was done. And I don't know what would have come in the future had he stayed,
Right.
right? And so um it really just came down to me being willing to trust that he is God and I am not.
It's such a hard thing to wrap your head around because through I my listeners know I went through a miscarriage when I was a surrogate. And
Oh,
it's one of those where again, like everything's going the way that you think that it's supposed to go. And all of a sudden, the rug is completely pulled out from under you. And the only way I got through it was knowing that whatever plan God had in mind, everything happens for a reason. Would I change having this podcast and being able to help people if I could have this baby for their parents? Of course. But at the same time, I'm now helping so many more people because I've learned so much through the process. And it's such a hard thing to come to terms with because bad things happen. And it's how
yes.
you then move forward that defines who you are. The bad thing doesn't define you, it's who you are as a person. And it's such a hard thing to understand and to comprehend, especially in the moment.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it seems so senseless, right? Like,
Right.
miscarriage is so hard because it's the epitome of no control,
Right.
right? And as humans, that's what we fight for, is control.
Right.
And loss, especially deep loss, will make you feel so out of control
Yeah.
that I think if you're not grounded in God at all, you will grasp for anything
Yeah.
looking for control. So, that's when people become hoarders. Like, you'll see so much of that hoarding because they're trying to control everything. Don't touch my stuff.
Right.
I want more stuff. This reminds me of them.
Right.
That's why people will set up shrines in their houses to people because they're looking for that sense of control. We need to hold on
Right.
and have control. And I think if you can get to the place to release that control and know that it was never yours to carry,
Right.
there's freedom in
For
that
sure.
space.
For sure. And I think it goes both ways. I think it can go with, I want to keep everything, or it also goes with the opposite of, I need to get rid of everything. And
Yes.
like your stepfather, pretending that the person never existed.
Yes. Yeah. So both extremes are very abusive
Right.
behaviors and emotionally unwell behaviors.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, my mom and her best friend came in and cleaned out all of Jay's clothes and then got rid of them. And fortunately, some of them had gone to his brother, and I called his brother back and I was like, no, no, I have children. Like, I want those clothes.
Right.
And they thought they were helping me,
Right.
right? But really, they crossed big boundaries with not asking me,
Right.
what do you want? It was okay that they had come out of the drawer. Maybe I needed that help to get them out of the dresser, but they should have asked me what I wanted to do with them. And I have since made pillows, gigantic, because Jay was gigantic,
Right.
gigantic
I
pillows
love that.
for my kids out of his t-shirts.
Right.
And so they all have what they call a papa pillow.
Oh, I love that.
And and so yeah, like I wanted to move, my kids didn't.
Hmm.
So we still live in the same house right now as we did. And I am still like getting rid of stuff because Jay was kind of a hoarder.
Right.
He was a brilliant artist and a metal guy. And I mean he was an incredible mechanic. He could make anything work. So like
Nice.
he would have 15 weed whackers to, make three
And
work,
he's like, I
right?
promise they're all gonna work.
And I mean, I think I have a stack of like 7 VCRs downstairs, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But
What am I gonna do with this?
yes, like what I don't want to just throw them away. Somebody might can use them, but slowly but surely I have started weeding out and also emotional energy. Like
Right.
that is one thing that I learned a lot about um loss is emotional energy.
Mm.
So prior to losing Jay, I had a ton of emotional energy.
Right.
Um, just I never got tired of people. I'm a give me all the people.
Hmm.
Um, just energy to burn. Like
Hmm.
I could get mad about dumb stuff. I could fight on Facebook all day and it never wore me out, like um and then after he died, all of that went away.
Oh,
I had
interesting.
no emotional energy. And so I don't think that that's talked about very much
Hmm.
with people because I think a lot of people are like, why am I so tired?
Yes.
Why can I not have any friends?
Yeah.
Why is this happening to me? And it's because we don't talk about emotional energy.
Right. Everything drains you.
Yes. So we talk a lot about physical. Sorry, I got makeup all over my face now. We talk about physical energy and and we know we expend
Right.
physical energy, right? You
Right.
expect to be tired at the end of a long day,
Right.
but we never talk about emotional energy. And I think that is a gap.
Hmm.
And because our society as a whole doesn't acknowledge grief, like,
Hmm.
there used to be mourning periods, right? There was an expectation of like you wore black for a year, and for a year, people knew that you were not functioning
Right.
at a normal level. But death today, we are so sanitized from.
Hmm.
Most people die in hospitals. We
Right.
never see the dead body. We never have to have anything to do with it. We show up to a funeral home where they have them laid out in these boxes, and we're just not a part of the process.
Right.
Where for the majority of human history, you would have been the one that touched your dead body, your dead family member and all of that sort of stuff. You would have been the processor.
Mhm.
So now we've disconnected the processing of that loss. And so it's just like, it's like you bought a new car. Like you
Right.
just got rid of the old car and now you bought a new car.
Right.
It's that disconnected. But it didn't change anything in the spirit just because our culture
Right.
changed our disconnection, right?
Right.
And it's really, really mind-blowing that we don't talk about how it drains you.
Mhm.
And so the expectation when you have loss is like, oh, the funeral's over, back to normal life, right?
Right.
And you just pick back up. And I mean, I still felt married for the first year.
Right.
It's like I could still hear him walking down the hallway for that whole first year.
Mhm.
I would pull into my driveway and still expect to see him standing there.
Right.
And I remember when I first dated somebody, like it's not that I felt like I was cheating. I knew very well that my vows said till death do you part. I knew that I was no longer married. So
Mhm.
I never felt like I was cheating. It just felt awkward.
Mhm.
Like, how do I put somebody else in this place?
Right.
Right. Um, and so there's just all of this emotional energy that you're processing through that nobody ever talks about. And that's why you're tired.
Right.
And that's why you don't want to make new friends. And that's really why culture, your community should be pressing in
Mhm.
because you're not capable of managing that for yourself anymore.
Right. It's interesting because one of the things with Judaism that I actually have really come to appreciate is their process of grieving. And everything is laid out so specifically. And so even from somebody who is not the most religious person all the way up to the very religious follow the same sorts of process. And it really helps with that whole emotional processing. It really helps with being able to go into that space for periods of time and say, "Yes, I am grieving." And so you in Judaism, I've talked about this before, but you try and bury the body as quickly as possible because you want that grieving process to start. You don't want it to continue on and on and on and on. And then that first 7 days after you've buried the person is something called Shiva, where it's basically the intense grieving process. You are literally at home, you have people coming to see you, you have people coming to talk about the person that has passed away. They're coming to comfort you. They're coming to bring food to your house. You literally are not supposed to do anything to the point where you're supposed to cover your mirrors because you really aren't going to look in the mirror to see how you look or whatever because you're
I
grieving,
love that. Yes.
right?
Yes. Because you look terrible.
Right, right. Your eyes are puffy, your face is red. Get over it. We all know you're going to be
I love
crying
it.
for a long time. It's fine.
Yes.
And then there's a period of 30 days called Shloshim, where it really is you're still in it's not as intense grieving as the first 7 days, but it's that period of I'm still here and the person's not. And how do I learn to accept that? And how do I learn to move forward with that? And there's certain prayers that you have to add to your daily prayer. And there's certain things that you say to God, not only to really appreciate the person who is here, but to appreciate the fact that God even brought them to life. And it's
Yes.
not about the death aspect of it. It's about being grateful for what you had and continuing to move forward. So the
Yes.
process of that really has enlightened, I think, my attitude towards death and towards saying, I know that there's something beyond what's here and I'm okay.
Yes. So that's part of what I love about the Jewish culture and tradition,
Mm,
is that it is so saturated in honoring God, right?
hmm
And what you just said just a second ago about um that that it was a gift that God put them here and that you had that time,
Right.
whatever, short time, long time, whatever.
Right.
But knowing that God is God and that they're autonomous.
Right.
I think sometimes we forget that, like, we take possession of people, right?
Right.
But we are not the creator
Right.
of people. God
Right.
is the creator of people. And so ultimately the goal is that he wants us.
Right.
And
Right. That person could be your soulmate, or you could feel that connection with your child who you're growing, but at the same time, we all still belong to God. Just because I grew
yes,
you doesn't mean that you're mine.
right. No, that's exactly right. It's a gift,
Right.
right? And ultimately that's one of the things I had to come to the conclusion with Jay was,
Mm,
he God gifted me the
right.
opportunity to be married to him for 10 and a half years and have these four like incredible kids
Mm,
um that carry his DNA, and I see pieces of him in each of them.
mm,
And because I had the experience of loss as a child, I feel like I've been able to navigate with my children well.
mm,
Um, Jay is an open conversation here.
right. He didn't just disappear.
That's correct. And that has been made clear to anybody, any man that has been around
Mm,
and interested in any sense is like, if you can't accept that Jay is an active part of our family,
right.
then you're not for
Right.
us,
You don't
right?
belong in the space.
Yes.
Right.
And because I still have little ones. I mean, my little one, she's just about to be 10.
Oh,
She didn't start processing her grief. She was only 8 months old when he
right. She
passed
doesn't even
away.
remember.
Yeah, she has no formative memory.
Right.
Um, and I tell them, I said, to know your dad is to know full spectrum.
Right.
He was awesome and he was an asshole. you know?
I love that you're so honest about it, that you haven't put him up on a pedestal and you're not like, he was a saint, he was the best person ever. No, he had real human emotions and real human
Yes,
capabilities.
he could be a total jerk face.
Right.
And I remind them of that. I'm like, so my 16-year-old son and I were talking one day, and I was like, I think you'd be mad at your dad. And he was like, why? I said, because your dad would deliberately embarrass you. And I was like, he would think that was I mean, we were punk rockers. Like,
Right.
we love to like antagonize and harass, you
Right.
know? And and I said, son, I said, every feeling you have about me, you would have about your dad.
Hmm.
As angry as you get at me, you would feel that way about your dad.
Right.
As much as you love me, you're gonna love your dad the same way.
Right.
Every feeling that you have toward me, you would experience it toward your dad if he was
Totally.
here. And so I've really tried to keep all of that very real so that they also don't put him on a pedestal as
Right.
though he was perfect, because he
Right.
wasn't.
And right, and then it's hard to live up to something as you grow up, to say, how I can't ever be like that person because he's immortalized.
That's what's so unfair about freaking dying on me. How do you compete with a dead man?
Seriously.
Can't.
No.
One of my girlfriends one time, she was hilarious. She was like, you should, because I had him cremated, so he lives on a bookshelf. Or he stays. What does he do on the
Right.
book? I don't know. He sits on the
All right.
bookshelf in an urn. Um, she was like, you need to start dropping firecrackers down there just just to antagonize them a little bit when you're mad at him. And I was like, that's freaking brilliant. I
That's
totally should do that.
hysterical.
Just some of our little sick humor, I guess. But um, so yeah, I try and keep it very real with my kids,
Hmm.
and full spectrum of who he was, and what he loved, and all of those sort of things.
Hmm.
And here's one thing that I learned that's very interesting. You have to be very careful with videos and dead
Interesting.
people.
Okay.
The brain cannot see a live image and reconcile that it's dead, which is
Interesting.
how people still are falling in love with Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and
Mm,
all of these dead celebrities, is
mm,
because they saturate in the videos.
interesting.
And that was a Holy Spirit revelation for me. So I'm very careful on how much video content I allow my kids to watch and see of their dad,
Mm,
because I need their brains to associate with him as dead. So they
mm.
can have all the pictures they want. They can see pictures. They have pictures. We have pictures still hanging up in the house. Um,
Right, but that living, moving image is no longer
mhm,
alive.
exactly.
Interesting. That's such an interesting point. I remember there hasn't been many celebrity deaths that have affected me, but for some reason, Heath Ledger sticks in my head really hard. And I really have a problem watching movies that he's in still, even though he's been gone for so long. And I didn't even know him personally. Like it's not like I was
Sure.
friends with him. But that
Right.
is one person. It's so weird that you say that because maybe that's why. Maybe my brain can't reconcile that he's gone unless I just stop watching the movies.
That's correct.
I can only
That's
imagine
exactly
how
right.
much harder it would be if I actually knew the person
Yeah, that's right. It's all for all of human history up until the last, what,
100
200
years or
years
something, right?
maybe. Yeah, that wasn't even an option.
Right. And even
So it
pictures up until recently, like you could have a painting of someone, but
that's correct. So
wow.
it's really a new phenomenon, and it's something that really needs to be addressed in the grief community, is
Hmm.
to not saturate yourself, and certainly don't allow your children
Hmm.
to saturate themselves in videos and stuff. And you see that on movies, right? They
Hmm.
show that where they'll just sit and watch these old family videos for hours and grieve and mourn, um and that's a great sentiment,
Hmm.
but it's really, really unhealthy for the person, and it will not process you through grief. It
Right.
will actually
Keep you in that space.
anchor you.
It
Yeah.
it's it actually also brings me to the Harry Potter book where I think it's the first one. Harry Potter finds the mirror of, and I always say it wrong, Earist, and I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. And he sits in front of it for hours and hours and hours because he sees what he wishes that he could have, which is his parents and his family.
Yes.
And Dumbledore is the one who basically says, you have to get up. You cannot
Yes.
sit here for all of time because you will lose yourself in in this non-existent life.
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly right. That 100%
Yeah, and it's
is
to
true.
me it's also the same thing of like, the first few weeks and the first few months afterwards I just kept asking myself, why? What if I did this? What if I did that? What if? Why did this happen? And I had to really train my brain to stop asking that and to start asking what now because there's
Yes.
nothing I could do to change what had happened.
Yes. Uh Absolutely. So Jay died of hypertension,
Mhm.
um, which is high blood pressure,
Right.
which is controllable, right? Um,
And something you can learn to keep an eye on for your kids.
that's exactly right. He was 38 years old when
Wow.
he died. Um, and so I definitely went through a period of like he was losing all of his teeth.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that was a sign of heart issues.
Hmm.
The dentist just told him, like, you have terrible teeth,
Right.
and uh, the, as far as I know, the dentist never said, hey, you need to go have your heart checked
Right.
because this is a sign of heart failure,
Right.
or your heart being bad. Hindsight, right? Like, I know more now about
Right.
stuff because looked into it. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I had heard of hypertension with, prenatal hypertension and,
Hmm.
stuff like that. I knew high blood pressure was dangerous for pregnant women
Hmm.
and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I was 37. Like, that just wasn't a topic of conversation
Right.
that I had ever had. It wasn't until my husband was dead that my father-in-law said, "Oh, I've had a high blood pressure. I was about his age." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that would
Yeah.
have been helpful information. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Are you freaking kidding me?
right.
And so, I mean, Jay had said things to me, and I'm like, you need to go get checked out. You
Mhm.
need to go to the doctor. But I have 5 kids to mommy. I'm not mommying a
Right,
grown man.
right.
I'm just not doing it. So I can't, I couldn't force him to go get help. And I had to release anger from that,
Mhm.
right? That he wouldn't go and that, because I went through that. Well, maybe I should have made him do it.
Right,
Maybe I should have forced him harder.
right,
No, he was a grown man.
right.
And this was his body was his responsibility to take care of. I did everything I could do. And so yeah, I had to go through that processing. Like, had I called 911 30 minutes earlier, because
Right.
he kept saying that he was hurting, right? And he got in the shower, which is what he always did when he was in pain.
Mhm.
And he got out of the shower and he was like, man, he was like, I just feel like I could fart the world. Like he just thought it was a gas bubble.
Right,
And then he was dead.
right.
I mean, I took 3 steps to rub his back and he
Gone.
started seizing.
Wow.
And it was just lightning fast. And so, yeah, I definitely had to process through, could I have done something different?
Right,
Could I have um caught it in some way?
right,
But he never alerted me. He never said to me like, "Oh my gosh, Stephanie, you need to call 911. This is the worst pain I've ever been in."
right.
And I had to come to the conclusion that I can't think for someone else.
Yep,
And if he didn't alert me, I wasn't just automatically aware.
right. But I think it's the same in terms of a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss too, where you you can control only so much, right? Like
Yes,
you can control what you're eating, you can control the activities that you do, and even if you do everything so, quote unquote correctly, there's still things that could go wrong. There's still things that God says, "No, this baby's not ready for earth yet." Like you can only control so much.
that's right. That is right. Back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Is
Right.
ultimately we don't have control.
Right.
And we can't, and to think that we could have done something differently
Right.
gives us control.
Right.
And if only I had, says that I could have controlled the outcome of that situation.
Right. And
And
I
so
think it's such a good lesson to say, not if only I had, but what can I do now?
yes, yes, what can I do now? I
Right.
only have this much knowledge,
Right.
and the knowledge I have today is what I have to work with.
Exactly. Um, one last question, because I think that what you just said lends into that. If you could give somebody a piece of advice for anything in terms of losing your father, losing your husband, moving forward and learning to live with grief, what would that be?
I guess my first thing would be, don't run from it.
Hmm.
Do not run from grief. You cannot outrun grief. The only way to make it through that valley of the shadow of darkness is to walk through it.
Hmm.
And I promise you that God is there. He is that pinprick of light that is in that darkness. And
Hmm.
if you will lock your eyes on that pinprick of light, he will lead you out.
Hmm.
And it is a journey. So just be willing to walk day in and day out of that journey and give yourself so much grace.
Yeah.
Just grace for you, grace for all the stupid things people say, grace for just everything. Just let it fall under grace, and don't get lost
Yeah.
in the place of grief.
Yeah. One of my favorite images is the idea of when you're walking in the sand and you see two footsteps that you can tell, God is walking with you. And then all of a sudden you see one and you think you're alone. And God says, no, those aren't your footsteps, they're mine. and God is really
Mhm.
carrying you. And I think that
Yeah.
looking at it in the other way of saying, walking through the valley and knowing that that one little pinprick of light is God that's ahead of you, and you just need to keep walking, keep moving forward, and that light will get bigger.
Yes, that's exactly right. I think another thing, and the Jewish tradition may do much better than I think modern day, especially Protestant Christianity does, and that is talking about how dark
Hmm.
that space is, right?
Hmm.
Um, because it's spiritual and
Hmm.
not physical, we don't give Psalm 23 talks about the shadow of darkness, that
Hmm.
I will fear no evil, right?
Hmm.
And when we think about a shadow, what is happening there, right? Something has cut the light that creates the shadow. And it's such a dark, dark, dark place that if you don't lock your eyes on the little bit of light that's there,
Hmm.
you'll feel like you're never coming out.
Right.
But you can get lost there.
Right.
And that's what I think a lot happens to a lot of people, is that they get lost because they don't know how to lock in
Hmm.
on the pinprick of light. And but God is there.
Right.
He wants you not to get lost there.
Right. It's almost like when you're looking at a panicked situation where I'm just thinking about, getting in an avalanche. My parents live in Salt Lake City, so we've heard a lot about snow and snowfall and avalanches. And one of the things they tell you to do is figure out which way is up. Because if you're
Yes,
panicking, all you're going to do is just clear more and more snow. And you could be digging down and not realizing that you're going the wrong way. But if you
that's
can
right.
take a moment and you can center yourself and you say, let me find which way is up. Then all
Yes.
of a sudden you can figure out where the light is.
Yes. That's right. That's what you're looking for, right?
Right,
Where do I see light
right,
in this space? And
right,
it may be a pinprick,
right.
but that's what you're going to go
And it
for,
may be the
right?
least expected thing. I remember even in the first few days after I had the miscarriage, we were fairly new to the community we lived in. We'd only been here about a year and a half at the time, whereas I
Oh,
had
wow.
come from a place where I had lived in for almost 20 years. So my
Right.
friendships were still fairly new here. And I remember one friend who we were friendly and we were fairly close, but not very close, just sat with me and just let me cry, let me talk, let me do nothing. And she's become one of my closest friends. And I so appreciate that little spark of light that she gave me to say, I'm here.
Yes. Yes. That's what I tell people, is just show up.
Right.
They may not even need you to do anything, but just sitting there, sitting in somebody's grief
Yep.
has to be the most powerful work a human can do.
Yeah.
You're not asking for anything from them,
Nope.
nor are you asking to do anything for them.
Right.
You are literally just sitting in it with them.
Right. And there's no expectation. It's just, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that's a powerhouse gift that
Yeah.
I don't think enough people practice.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes what I needed. I didn't want to have to figure it all out. I didn't want to have to tell somebody what I needed.
Right.
Like, I mean, I had a dead husband. I needed my lawn cut. I
Right.
needed my kids help take care of. I
Right.
needed laundry done. Like,
Right.
I had two people and now I don't.
Right.
But I didn't want to have to tell everybody like what I needed. I
Right.
didn't really know what I needed.
Right. Because the
All I
next thing you know, you turn around, the laundry's piled up and the grass is 4 feet tall, and you're like, oh, I guess if I had told somebody I needed my laundry done, maybe it would have been done. But you don't think about that in the moment.
Yeah, I needed it done right then. I didn't have the forethought to think on
Right.
Thursday I'm
Right.
going to need the laundry done.
Right.
It was like, oh crap, we're 10 loads in now.
Right.
And it really is. I actually hope one day to establish like a widowhood um program, I guess you could say, for
Hmm.
churches that say these are like what how you need to set things up,
Hmm.
right? And this is how long you need to prepare to do it. Like, this
Right.
isn't going to go away in 6 weeks. This isn't going to go away in 6 months.
Right.
Even after they get remarried, they're still a widow in heart,
Right.
and it takes time. Their marriage is going to need some extra
Right.
support. They're going, um because, like, marrying a widow is totally different than marrying a divorcee, and I know
Right.
because I've been both.
Right.
And there are extra complications because, like I said, my Jay is still an active part of my family.
Right. Whereas your
My
ex, you're like, nope, he's done.
That's exactly right. He
Right.
was not an active part of the family, and Jay is. So,
Right.
so different situations
Right.
there. And it's just, I hope that more people can quit running
Hmm.
from those situations and dig in and just be there, like you
Right.
said.
Right. And I think that one of the most important things is to know you're not alone. And
Yes.
I'm actually in the process of creating, I have my first prototype, but I have a ring that says talk to me. And it's a way to signify whatever survivor of loss you are. So I have this one is sort of like a greenish blue for miscarriage loss. And when you're wearing the ring, it's one of those that you if somebody else is wearing it, number one, you know automatically that they're survivor of miscarriage or of pregnancy loss. But if it's somebody who's, let's say, a widow or a child who's lost a parent, it's a different color and you can associate right away and say, oh, that person's wearing that ring and I know exactly what kind of loss they have. And I'm with you. I know exactly where you are. I know exactly how you're feeling. It might not be the same exact thing, right? 100%, because we can never know, right? Unless you walk in somebody's shoes, which you can't do. But you
Right.
have been through the same situation and you can associate and you can automatically talk to that person and say, I got you.
I love that.
Thank you. I'm in the process of developing it right now. So I'm in the talks with a ring company and working on it. So hopefully it comes out soon.
That is fantastic. And
Thank
I'll tell
you.
you why. I'll tell you one reason that I think that is so great is because um it's not just something that we wear, right?
Right.
Like, it's not just something you would never know walking by somebody
Right.
what they've been through.
Right.
But to have something like that that shows, and even if your color is a widow and you see somebody with a miscarriage color on, you still know that you have that commonality of
Right.
loss,
Right.
where you can say, hey, tell
Right.
me your story, or,
Right.
you know like,
And if you
whatever.
don't want to talk about it that day, don't wear the ring.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I
That's
love
my
that.
goal. So hopefully I'll keep you posted as to when they come out.
Yes. And I have a girlfriend that does grief counseling that I think would love that sort of stuff as well. So,
Amazing.
yes, let
Such
me
important
know.
work, grief counseling and all of it.
Look, it absolutely is. I did grief share for a year. I did 2 semesters
Hmm.
after I lost Jay, and it was so good. And they
Right.
do everything. They do like suicide loss,
Right.
miscarriage, widowhood, murder. Like,
Wow.
they go through full spectrum.
Right.
And even though I didn't experience all of those things, some of the feelings that come with each of those things I did experience.
Hmm.
And so each section was really helpful
Hmm.
and helped me process a lot and just understand. Like, one of the things that I did right after Jay passed away, I had major decision fatigue.
I know
And
the feeling.
yes.
And
And
information overload.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And I decided I was going to wear the same pants every day for a month. And so I did.
Okay.
And of course, nobody noticed, nobody cared. And when I was doing my grief share, one of the guys was talking about how he did not wash a dish for a year. He just
Wow.
kept buying new.
Oh.
Because to wash them, that emotional
It-
energy, back to
Right.
emotional energy, right? He could not gather the emotional energy to wash
Right.
those cups. And so he just did what he had to do to continue to survive. And
Yep.
instead of pushing through and forcing himself to do something he just couldn't manage,
Right.
he just didn't. And so even those things weren't the same, hearing that coming from somebody else, like, oh my gosh, they were so overwhelmed
Right.
too. It's like, I'm not crazy for feeling so overwhelmed,
Right.
and
And
it
I'm not
just,
alone.
yeah, I'm not alone.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's the other point with the ring that I'm so excited by is because it hits you at different times. Like when you go to grief counseling, that's the time where you're like, but what if I'm not in that space right now? What if I can't get
Yes.
into that space? But if you're wearing the ring and you see somebody else and you're like, oh my gosh, now is the time I needed to talk about it. I just found somebody. That's perfect.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I did a lot. I had a girlfriend at the very beginning that I would probably, the texts were probably the craziest thing, but I would process and send her these texts. And so since then, when I see widows on Facebook, I will reach out to the widows and I'm like, look, I know right now you're in shock and you have no emotional energy. I'm not trying to be your friend. I'm not trying to suck any life out of you. I'm just telling you I'm here. I understand the crazy. Message me anytime. I get how crazy your brain may be feeling,
Hmm.
and and the thoughts that you have may even seem totally crazy. There's no judgment here. Just feel free to message me.
Right.
And I have
That's
had
amazing.
some that have been beautifully, um like they needed that, right? They needed somebody to just kind of get it.
Right.
um and then I've had some that were not responsive at all, and
That's what they
just
needed.
that's just where they are. And so eventually I'll be like, hey, look, I'm here. I'm not going to check on you anymore because
Right.
you're not responding, but I'm here if you need me. And so just keeping that door open.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, if people would like to find you, where can they reach out to you?
So my website is thestephaniejordan.com, and you should be able to email me from there. But my email is also author at thestephaniejordan.com. And I'm on Instagram at the Stephanie Jordan, and on Facebook at the Stephanie Jordan. So you should be able to
Perfect.
find me in any of those places.
Perfect. Thank you so, so much. This conversation was amazing and beautiful and heart-wrenching and all, everything. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a great time to talk with you, and thanks for letting me share my story.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining me today on Pushing Through Loss. I hope this episode has provided support, understanding, and a sense of community. Remember, you are not alone on your journey, and you have the strength to face the challenges that come your way. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave me a review and consider sharing it with others who may benefit. Together, we can help each other heal and activate our inner strength warriors. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations, and until next time, you got this.